no reason. What did it do? What did it do? Let's talk about the Spanish Grand Prix. We're gonna jump on into the meat and potatoes, the drama. And I'm over every single analysis video and conversation point about this. There's a little bit to unpack here. The first question is, why did Red Bull Racing opt for Max to come in for new hards as opposed to stay on old softs? Knowing Max Verstappen, would he have rather stayed out with P1 and fight the McLarens for position as opposed to coming in P3 with hards? We obviously don't know the answers because we're not Red Bull Racing, but here's what we can look at the data. Let's look at fast lane degradation. It's the estimated change in lap time per lap, the slope of linear regression, across green flag laps, excluding the first and last lap. Positive means degradation or getting slower. Let's look at his softs. He was at 0.4 seconds, but with the hards, he's at 0.58. We can also look at consistency, which Fastlegs has as the standard deviation of lap times within the stint, excluding the first and last green flag. Lower is more consistent. We're looking at his softs, which was 0.660, versus his hards, which is 1.141, knowing about the incident and everything else that happened afterwards. Could the softs have been better for 0.13 seconds of degradation? Especially when you're pushing and fighting, it's really likely that he would have been pass regardless. The advantage of fresh tires cannot be overstated enough, and we've seen that happen in this race alone. For example, Nico Hulkenberg, Alonso, etc. But with hards, I think the really big issues you have to do the lack of grip, along with the long warm-up window. And we saw that when he lost control at the last corner there. I would also like to denote here is you and I have the luxury of sitting in this, marinating, looking at all the drivers, even during the race. We see the bigger picture. When you're in a race situation, you have seconds. Now we have the George Russell thing, which I think I can share a little bit more here. So the FIA have stated in their document, it was clear the driver in the number 1 car, Verstappen, was asked by his team to give the position back to car 63, which is George Russell, for what they perceived to be an earlier breach by car 1 leaving the track and gaining a lasting advantage. In fact, we had later determined that we would take no further action in relation to the incident. You gave up the spot for no reason. I think that one by far blows my mind. That is the big point number 2. Up until this point, Red Bull has forced the FIA's hand every single time, as in Max makes the move, aggressive, non-aggressive, whatever you all may think about it, and then the FIA has to respond. This is the first time in a long time they have asked Max Verstappen to give back a position. Driver of the number 1 car was clearly unhappy with the team's request to get the position back. At the approach of turn 5, car 1 swiftly reduced its speed to allow car 63 to overtake. However, car 63 got ahead of car 1. At the entry of turn 5, car 1 suddenly accelerated and collided with car 63. The collision was undoubtedly caused by the actions of car 1, and therefore we imposed a 10-second time penalty. Someone asked how the stewards determined this and where was the review, etc. Why did it take him so long to do the 3 points? The onboard that we're seeing floating around right now, the stewards wouldn't have access to right away. Formula 1 cars only have the bandwidth to transmit 1 camera at a time as chosen by the race director. All they had were rear view shots. Everything that's not transmitted is obviously all recorded, saved on the car's computer, and it has to be manually transferred afterwards. Sometimes I understand the stewards get berated for investigating accidents afterwards. It's because they don't have all the information in front of them or accessible to them. A YouTube comment that I saw scrolling around here. These young fans are, hate to say it, soft. Max is reminiscent of the Schumacher and Senna days of driving. Have to do tough and rough driving to get championships. Welcome to this edition of Fact Check. Did Michael Schumacher potentially intentionally wreck in 1994, winning the championship? Maybe. They couldn't prove it. But in 1997, he was disqualified from the championship for intentionally wrecking. Senna was also disqualified in 1989. So before you quote that Schumacher and Senna were some greats who drove aggressively and argy-bargied and hit people, they were too penalized. People have asked if this is enough punishment for Max Verstappen. I know nothing happened to George, but I don't think we have to wait for something to happen to have severe punishments. I kind of want to stop drivers from potentially hurting other drivers before it gets to that point. So yes, I do think he should have been punished a little bit more. However, all past punishments of intentionally wrecking or bumping into each other have kind of gone to this minimal level of punishment. You had Vettel intentionally bumping into Lewis Hamilton in Baku, and that was a 10-second stop and go. You had Maldonado in 2012 bumping Sergio Perez, and that was a grid penalty. So all of these intentional bumpings have always been some kind of grid penalties, stop and go, and never anything more. Do a lot of people think it should have been more punishment? Yes. Is it in line with what the FIA have done? Also yes. I usually like aggressive driving, but that was, You guys can leave your thoughts in the comments. I think that really sums it up. Besides that, I thought Barcelona was pretty good. I usually give every single Formula 1 race, or really any race that I watch, a 7. A 7 is an average rating for me out of 10. Oscar Piastri had a pole to flag win. We love to see it. He has the largest pole margin of the season so far, a 0.209. He's outqualified Lando Norris 5 times in 2025, which is fun because last year he only did it 4 times. And he's always on the verge of making history with 5 wins. If Oscar Piastri gets another win, he'll be the Australian driver with the single most wins in a season. I also really enjoyed that after the race, he said it was nice to bounce back from Monaco, as if Monaco went just so poorly for him. This man is fighting for P1 only. Piastri just excites me as a driver because I think he has so much more potential. I'm hoping we see a lot of driver championships from him. He also had Lando Norris. The McLaren's taken home a 1-2, which you can't really complain about. He did say, "It's been a good weekend. I lost out to the better guy this weekend." He did have a rough start, losing a position to Max Verstappen and almost to George Russell, but he was quick to regain that P2 bag, of course, with a much, much better car. And for a second there, the 1-2 was kind of at risk with Max Verstappen's 3-stop strategy, which was a wild thing that I thought I'd never see. But with the safety car, they were allowed to break away. The whole thing happened, and they clinched that 1-2 easily. There's no reason they're not going to win Constructors. They're ahead by so many points. Speaking of the Constructors champions, let's talk about Ferrari, who have now moved to P2 in the Constructors Championship. And I do love the Constructors Championship for that reason, right? You're showing that both of your drivers, with the car that you have built, it's really like a team score. Mercedes hasn't been consistent in this triple header as they have been in the start of the season, and no other team is really getting both drivers up front scoring those points weekend after weekend. P2 in the Constructors is great. That's something you bring to your board meetings. That's something Fred Vasseur brags about, to sponsorships, saying, look how good this car is. We can maybe make it better if you give us more of your money. Look at us. There's also a different amount of prize money depending on where you fall in the Constructors. I know Ferrari gets additional money for being a legacy team, but still, P2 doesn't hurt. Unfortunately for Lewis Hamilton, it was his worst race yet, finishing P6. Fred Vasseur said that there was a car issue with Lewis Hamilton. I believe it was his floor. But seeing how well his teammate has been doing the past couple of races, hopefully Lewis Hamilton can catch up. Otherwise, understandably, in this comment section, I'm going to be asked, is it too early to say Lewis Hamilton is washed? And I'd be remiss if I missed out on talking about Nico Hulkenberg. I don't know anyone who dislikes Nico Hulkenberg, but now I'm afraid that I've said that on YouTube. He did have a rough qualifying, but that worked out in his favor. Towards the starting laps of the race, he gained about 5 positions, and he had an extra set of softs because he exited qualifying early. He's playing checkers while we're playing chess. Just kidding, it definitely wasn't on purpose. Softs allowed him to pass Lewis for P6, and of course with Max Verstappen's penalty, it got him to a P5. This is his best result ever in Barcelona, and this is Kick Sauber's best result since Valtteri Bottas took it in P5 in the Imola GP in 2022. This is one car. Kick Sauber now jumps up 2 positions past Aston Martin and Alpine for 8th in the Constructors Championship. Knowing that McLaren has run away with P1, it's interesting to see where everyone else falls into place, especially these back and forth. One driver has made such a big jump. Imagine if everyone got their shit together. I've been seeing some things we need to have an uncomfortable conversation about Kimi and Antonelli, and I don't think we do. I understand in this triple header, he has yet to score a point. But a lot of it, not his fault. Yes, he's been knocked out of Q2 twice, but at both Imola and Barcelona were both mechanical failures. Nothing to do because of him. He's returning to tracks that he's raced in his junior career, so we really wanted to see a comparison between what he's done before and now in a Mercedes, but unfortunately not able to do that. He still qualified 3/10 within Russell, and now with a little bit of break, hopefully he can mentally reset. Mercedes can figure out what's going on with his car specifically, because George seems to be okay, and we can see more of his potential blossoming throughout the rest of the season. And if I may gloat for a mere minute, as some of you have made it this far, I want you to understand in other parts of the internet, some people are very mean, and I mentioned how the technical directive will not change things that much. And I was called a liar, don't know what I'm talking about, blah, 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 blah. What did it do? What did it do? People were saying it's going to reset the competitive order, McLaren's not going to be as good. Ferrari was talking about it being a game changer. McLaren's still on top. Max was looking as a good threat on a track that the car does well in. Ferrari and Mercedes were fighting for their usual position. During the weekend, McLaren chief designer Rob Marshall said, "What loss of performance?" Red Bull then later admitted it was a very, very minor impact and a slight characteristic change. Team principal Andrea Stella of McLaren did say the McLaren 39's performance does not come from one single area, but instead a cumulative effect from the philosophy of the car. Sorry, but we're going to have to deal with McLaren dominance for the rest of the season. Let me know what you thought about the Spanish Grand Prix below. If you're a racing fan, there's a lot of stuff coming up in the month of June that I'm pretty excited about. I'll put my terribly made graphic up. So make sure you get your extra monitors, your extra TV. I do have 2 in the living room. Phone, tablets, and whatever, because there's going to be a lot of racing to watch and not enough time. Oh, there's also Pikes Peak. I can't even fit everything in here.